Now, in this video, what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the consequences of the Electoral College. I want to focus on the disadvantages of it, and then I want to suggest that there might be some advantages to the Electoral College system as well. Again, I'm not telling you what you should believe, and I'm not even going to tell you where I fall on the advantages and disadvantages side. I will tell you at the end that I don't think it's likely to change, but that's a separate issue as to whether it should change or not. So first, let's talk about the disadvantages. Most people get the disadvantages. The advantages are, quite frankly, that sometimes a candidate with the fewest national votes winds up winning. You total up, in a democracy, the basic idea is people get to vote, you total up the votes, and the person with the most votes wins. And so 4 times in our history, we've had it be that the person with the fewest votes wound up winning. And in 2000 and 2016, we had this kind of result. So it's not something that's just historical, it's present tense. Now, what I want to do is I want to explain how this happens. Why does it happen that it winds up being that a candidate can wind up getting fewer popular votes? That's what I mean, popular votes. I'm talking about all the votes across the nation totaled up, but still win in the Electoral College. And to do this, I'm going to come up with sort of a fake example of a country that has an Electoral College, but there's only going to be 10 states. But it will explain how we get this strange result. Okay, so here's my kind of fake setup, but you'll see how this works out. In this case, we have candidate A and candidate B running against one another. On the column that would be, I guess, the third column where it says popular vote for candidate A, I'm going to list the popular vote there. The next column to the right, I'm going to list the popular vote for candidate B. And then I'm going to put their electoral votes in the fourth and the fifth column, or the next one's over. And again, my fake little example, 9 of the states in this fake country have 100 people, and they get 5 electoral votes. And one state has 120 people, and it gets 6 electoral votes. And so I want to show you by this example how it is that somebody can wind up losing in the popular vote, but winning in the Electoral College. So let's assume that candidate A wins. Remember I said there's 100 people in each state. So 65 people vote for candidate A, 35 vote for candidate B. All of the states in this example have the winner take all rule, which I explained previously. So candidate A gets 5 electoral votes. They win state number 2, 60-40, so they get 5 more electoral votes. They win state number 3, 58-42, so they get 5 more electoral votes. They win state number 4, 57-43, they get 5 more electoral votes. And they win state number 5, 52 votes to 48 votes, and so they get 5 more electoral votes. So right now, candidate A is looking pretty good because he's already got 25 electoral votes, right? There's a total of 51 electoral votes, so you need 26 to win. In state number 6, candidate B wins, but it's a really close election, 51-49 votes. But because they have the winner take all rule, it doesn't matter that it's close because candidate B gets all the electoral votes, even if it's a close election. In state number 7, it's also a close election where candidate B gets 52 votes, candidate A gets 48 votes, so they get all the electoral votes. State 8, there's another 51 vote to 41-9 vote victory by candidate B, so they get all 5 of those electoral votes. In state number 9, candidate B actually does really well, gets 58% of the vote, 58 votes to 48 votes, so they get 5 more. And now we're down to state number 10 that has 6 electoral votes. And in this vote, but the population of state number 10 is 120 people. And in this particular case, what happens is candidate B gets 62 votes and candidate A gets 58 votes. That's actually like getting 51% of the vote. And so what does that mean? It means that if you totaled up all of the popular votes for candidate A and all of the total votes for popular votes for candidate B, candidate A actually got more votes than candidate B. 538 votes to 482 votes. But in the Electoral College, candidate A only got 25 votes and candidate B got 26 votes. Now, why did this happen? Because in states 6, 7, and 8, candidate B won, but it was by a very small margin. And in state 10, candidate B won by a very small margin, but because of the winner-take-all rule, candidate B won all of those electoral votes. And that's how it happens. So oftentimes when people are saying there's a problem with the Electoral College, it's not really that the problem is the Electoral College. The problem is, to the extent that you believe this is a problem, the problem is the winner-take-all rule. So a candidate wins all the electoral votes, even in a really close statewide election. That's how we get this odd result sometimes of a candidate getting more popular votes, but losing in the Electoral College. So that's the major disadvantage of the Electoral College, is that sometimes the person with the fewest votes winds up winning. There are other people who would also argue that the Electoral College gives more power to the small states because of the way electoral votes are allocated. But I would argue to you that that's not a design flaw, that's a design feature. The framers did that on purpose. But there's something problematic about the idea that a candidate with the fewest votes wins. So what are the advantages? Well, what some people argue is one of the advantages is that the Electoral College winds up magnifying the support for the winner. That even in a close election, it winds up looking like the candidate had a larger support, and that gives them more legitimacy. That gives them the greater ability to say, I was the victor, and now I'm going to move forward with my plan. So here's a list of some of the last 8 elections, right? Now, you can see the year 1992 to 2020, and then I've only listed the winner in the Electoral College. So Bill Clinton won twice, President Bush, George W. Bush won twice, Barack Obama won twice, Donald Trump won once, and Joe Biden won once, as of this recording. I mean, you can see there's an asterisk next to George W. Bush's first election and one next to Donald Trump, because in both of those elections, they had fewer votes, but still won in the Electoral College. But that's not the point I'm trying to make in this particular thing. In the next column over, it shows the total number of electoral votes that the candidates won. There are a total of 538 electoral votes. You need 270 to win. And in the next column over, what you see is the percentage of the popular vote that these candidates won. Like in 1992, Bill Clinton only won 43% of the vote, but he won 68.8% of the electoral votes. One of them makes him look like he didn't have very much support. The other one makes him look like a real strong victor. In 1996, Bill Clinton also didn't get a majority of the popular vote, but his lead in the Electoral College, even bigger, 70%, a little bit more than 70%. In George W. Bush's case, it isn't just that he only got 47.87% of the vote, he got less than Al Gore, right? But he got 50.37% of the Electoral College. Now, this isn't the case where the winner was magnified. In fact, in both George Bush's elections, it was close in the popular vote and close in the Electoral College. But go back to Barack Obama in 2008, he got just under 53% of the vote, but he won over 67% in the Electoral College. And when he ran for re-election, he only got 41% of the vote, but he got almost 62% in the Electoral College, right? And then Donald Trump's election was one of those elections where the candidate with the fewest votes won. But even in Joe Biden's victory, where he got 51.3% of the vote, the electoral votes, he got almost 57%. So some people argue that one of the things the Electoral College does is it gives the president more legitimacy to go ahead and say, I won, so I'm going to try and get the things that I ran on adopted. I want to suggest that there's another advantage to the Electoral College that's worth considering. And that is that candidates running for office, presidential candidates, have to build wide rather than deep coalitions. Let me explain what I mean. If we did a national popular vote, I think there's a chance that it would fundamentally change the way presidential candidates campaigned. For example, if we were doing a popular vote, if you're running as a Democrat to be the president, right now with the way the Electoral College works, you're not going to spend a bunch of time in California because you know you're going to win California. You already know you're going to win. So why go to California? You don't need to. But if we did a national popular vote, Democratic candidates would have a lot of reason to go to California. They could spend a ton of time in California and try and get as many people as possible to get out and vote. They'd come to Los Angeles. They would go to San Diego. They would go to areas in California and try and get as many Democrats as possible. But would they waste their time going to Iowa? Would they waste their time going to Nevada? Would they waste their time going to Arizona? Probably not. There just aren't that many people there, right? So if they want to get as many Democrats out to vote as possible, they would just focus on areas where there are a whole bunch of Democrats and address the concerns of a whole bunch of Democrats. So they'd spend a ton of time in California. They'd spend a ton of time in New York, not in upstate New York, which is actually very conservative, but part of New York where Democrats are all over the place. They would go to places where there are a bunch of Democrats and they would try and get as many people out to vote as possible. And that's what I mean by a deep coalition. They'd be digging down and trying to scoop up as many Democrats as possible. But with the way the Electoral College works and the winner-take-all rules, Democrats aren't going to spend a bunch of time in California because they know they've already won California. So what are they going to do? They're going to go to Arizona, or they're going to go to Pennsylvania, or they're going to go to Michigan. And so let's say they go to Michigan and they spend a whole bunch of time there. They're putting on commercials, they're holding rallies, and now the polls start to change and it looks like, hey man, I've got Michigan locked up. Well, what do? They have to move on to another state and try and win those electoral college votes. So they move on to Pennsylvania. And they start campaigning there. They start spending money on commercials. They have rallies all over the place. And let's see, they see that their polls are going up. They're getting more support. Well, now they can move on to another state. They have to move on to another state. They have to get as many states as they can to get over that 270 threshold of electoral votes. So what the Electoral College does, because so many states have the winner-take-all rule, is it forces candidates, once they know they have a state locked up, once they know that they're going to win the state, to move on to the next state. And that's what I mean by a wide coalition. Now, whether you agree with that or not is entirely up to you. But I do think it's worth considering, and there's one more sort of bigger picture that I want you to think about. Oftentimes when people talk about changing something like the Electoral College system, what they don't think about is what will the consequences be of making this change? Well, one of the things I'm suggesting here is it would fundamentally change the way candidates campaigned. I think Democrats would spend all their time in areas where they could get out as many Democrats as possible. Now, if you think that's a good thing, then that's not a problem. But if you haven't thought about that, maybe you should. What it also is intended to show is that sometimes when we change things, the rules, there are unintended consequences. And so it's really important not just talk about the changes that we want, but what we think the likely consequences of such a change would be. Sometimes changes are made with the best of intentions, and then unintended consequences follow, and all of a sudden we wind up with a result that wasn't what we expected. Those are the advantages and disadvantages to the Electoral College that I'm going to touch on here. There are others that you can go online and find, but for our purposes, that's all I'm going to say.